This talk is called CorgiSpace, or Short Legs on Purpose, or my approach to making small games. My name is Adam Saltsman, and I work on pretty big games at Thinky normally. Some of those are pictured here, but for the past year or so, I have been making new web games again. Some I used to do a long time ago, and I've been having a super good time getting back into it lately. But it's been different than it was last time I used to do this, which was like 15 years ago or something. All of these games have been made in short amounts of free time. That part is not super different, but I have released and been really pleased with the vast majority of the games that I started, and that part is really different. I think I've only shelved maybe 2 or 3 of these little projects as they got started. I have been having a super good time using my free time to do this, which is a little different than it used to be as well, and I think might be actually really important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been up to and what I've been thinking about. So starting new games sometimes can be really fun. For example, you start making it and it doesn't turn out how you want. So maybe you throw it away and start over, or you start questioning yourself and your abilities. There is somehow you can have both a blank page problem of like, how do I even get started? But you can also have I took way too many notes and now this project is kind of overspec'd and I'm intimidated problem. Sometimes you have what I would call bad heuristics, meaning you're not sure what to try next or what will help most to make your design better. Or there's like a version of that that's like more unclear creative direction. Either the project is too familiar or it's too confusing or something. Maybe, ironically, you have received too much advice. You know that you have to start small already and fail fast and iterate and find the fun and kill your darlings, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Anyway, and then sometimes you just end up spending 2 days setting up Project Boilerplate, and now the game jam is over or something, right? So then you go kind of into a doom spiral. Maybe you have a vague sort of generalized sense of despair. Maybe you just like quit making small games for a decade and grieve your early creative death, et cetera, et cetera. So this all has been leading me to think that unfun process might be an existential threat. And I've got a quote here from Patricia Highsmith, who wrote The Talented Mr. Ripley and Strangers on a Train, amongst other things that I really love. And part of this, though, is a bunch of other convictions that I have. One is you need to make more than one game in order to get good at making games. I guess, unless you make Balatro, but most of the time you need to make more than one game in order to get good at making games. And I think process, the way you do this, if that is riddled with these sad, kind of desperate, boring tasks, that's kind of a puritanical threat to your work, and that a fun game idea, I think, is more likely to die from bad process than from being a bad idea. And I think a designer is more likely to give up on a project because of bad process than from having a bad idea. So I want to talk about, I guess, partly, how to make games better, how to have more fun doing it, because I think that might be really important. Part 1 of this talk is going to be talking about doing things that are easy and not obvious. Part 2 of this talk is going to be about separating ideas from formulas, and how you can use that to have more fun while you work and work a little more quickly, maybe. And part 3 is going to be about noticing. So part 1, this partly comes from a place of believing that game development dogma is rooted very much in things that are both hard and obvious. And I think this is a trickle-down effect from solving problems with money. But I also think none of us have any money, so that might be a stupid way to work. And it's also kind of boring and miserable. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of doing the opposite of that. I say how to do easy things, though. This is going to be a common theme in this talk, is the English language slightly failing me when I try to talk about kind of complex abstract concepts. But here I do want to clarify, how to do easy things doesn't necessarily mean it's absolutely zero effort or it was trivial to think of, but it does mean going with the grain. For example, I think dev tools kind of have a grain to them that you can work with. And I think your brain has a grain that you can work with also. And predominantly when I say doing easy things, I am thinking about and referring to working with the grain of your dev tools and working with the grain of your brain. Sometimes it's also just really trivially easy to do too, but this is the main thing. When I say dev tools have a grain, what I'm talking about is dev tools have default behaviors, things that are easy to set up, things that are robust, things that are reliable, and other things maybe not so much, right? And here, so working with the grain of your tool means doing what comes natural to that tool. But this is not always what the tool says is correct or good to do with it. Marketing materials and tutorials often do not know the real grain of a tool. So going with the grain of the tool means that you have to know that stuff. You need to be, as you're using your tools, noticing what is actually easy, what is actually reliable. And I think this is kind of true of your brain also. I think it has default behaviors and things that are easier for it to do than others. And working with the grain means doing what comes natural to your brain in this case. This is not always what your self says is correct or good to do either. I think game devs and artists of all types often do not know the full grain of their brain yet. We're always learning things about that. So going with the grain of your brain still means that it's okay and maybe actually really good for you to embrace your predilections and probably be aware of what they are, but don't be afraid of them. Notice what actually comes naturally to you as an artist or a creator. Notice what things actually come from or through you, and use those things. So for me, that means I am making games often out of the tile map feature in the Pico 8 tool, and I'm drawing a lot of science fiction crates. And yes, I'm aware that people have done pixel art crate-based games in the past, but I think what I'm doing with them is a little different, partly because of the way that I am using this tool and the way I think about these things while I work with them. So that's, in terms of when we talk about easy and not obvious, that's what I mean by easy. You're leaning into the things that you and your tool want to do anyway. In terms of not obvious, there's a couple of things here. One is you can definitely curate a stronger sense of what kinds of things are obvious by just playing games. You can be playing those games and noticing what do they have in common, what kinds of things are kind of the default way of solving a problem or introducing something about a design, what's kind of industry standard, and then you can simply not do those things. But maybe more importantly, you can use easy things, easy meaning with the grain, right? You can use easy things as prompts for things that are not obvious. So for example, getting character movement working is can be kind of difficult to do in the game engine. But teleporting from point to point in a game might be relatively easy to do. You don't need a physics engine to do that. You might be able to ask yourself, hey, is teleporting how this kind of game normally handles movement? If not, then this is something that would qualify as an easy and not obvious thing to do. And you can try it because it's really easy to try. And when you try it, you can see if it works. It doesn't mean it's going to work. It might be a complete failure and not useful to you, but you can try it and you can notice things, right? And so I think one of the ways that you do these non-obvious things when you're doing your game design is by kind of being committed to this idea of going with the grain of the tool and going with the grain of your brain. Oh, and yeah, but why not just do the obvious thing anyways, though? It's easier, right? You don't have to think so hard or something. But I think there's a definite risk that as a creator, you'll get bored making that project and maybe quit making it. There's definitely a risk that players will get bored of playing it and maybe quit partway through. There is a very high risk that somebody with much more money than you already did it better than this anyways. And it's probably really hard to do. The obvious things are very often huge amounts of work that you may not even be able to afford to do in the first place. Yeah, right. I mean, yes, sure. Having levels is too obvious. Yes, it is okay to put levels in your game. The utility here, the tool, the thing that can benefit you maybe is how to make a game that usually has levels not have them anymore. That might be an interesting design prompt. Cranking out a ton of levels might be a ton of work. This might be easy and not obvious to just not have levels. But if it's a game that needs to have game stuff in it, that's completely fine, obviously. So yeah, this first thing, this part one is very much about going with the grain. I think a couple other things I wanted to add about this is I don't think this is a thing you can rush, really. Figuring out the easy thing that goes with the grain sometimes requires a little bit of stewing on it, or a little bit of marination time, or reflection time. Like, these things have to sit. You need to be able to digest these things a little bit to see what you can do often. But I think the odds that this makes what you're doing more fun to do, and designers having more fun means more games might get finished, and maybe even more than one game gets actually finished. I think those chances just go up when you're approaching things this way. Anyway, so that's part one. We're going to come back to that. We're going to mention more about that as we go. But for now, I would like to start digging into part two, separating our ideas from our formulas. And one small warning: the goal for this section is not to memorize binary noun labels that make all our problems go away, but we are going to be using language as best we can to kind of fence in something that I think is a little messy, but I think has been really, really a big part of my process, and this pattern of taking new ideas to completion without having to bail partway through. Okay. So scenario: you're making a game and you have an idea, which can be anything. Maybe you've got dog walking, but with some Balatro stuff, or you want to make a space station sim, or you want to make Tetris again or something. And you're good at prototyping. You get things up and running pretty quickly, and right away, like always, there's problems with the prototype or this first draft. Either it's not fun, or it's kind of confusing to play, or it doesn't look very good, or whatever. Or maybe it's too hard to make level 2, or it's too hard. It's really intimidating to think about the 17 more levels that you'll have to make after this, or whatever. And I think you're at an inflection point here where whatever idea you had got you so pumped up that but now you're running into a problem. So I think these ideas that whatever this thing is that you started with, if that made you sit down at a computer or at your card game supplies or whatever and actually get something working, I default to assuming that something in there is powerful. Something about that idea is good and special. Something about that idea was demanding your attention. I think it's sort of silly to discount that or discard that, but I think it's equally silly to expect that your first draft or your first kind of way of formulating that idea, the idea that that's never going to be great on the first try. And so I think like partly what we're going to be pushing for here is how do we hang on to that, energetic, powerful, but confusing thing and refine it and improve it. So concrete example, game I made over the past year is a cute puzzle game called Dust Bunny. And when I started working on Dust Bunny, I had a good idea for a new game based on vacuuming the house. So basically over the summer, I was cleaning the house and I noticed that the vacuum cleaner getting stuck under the table was pretty gamey. It can only enter the space under the table from certain directions. The vacuum's kind of a weird shape to begin with. Has weird movement restrictions, but as long as you get everything under the table clean, you got the job done. And that starts to feel like kind of a easy but not obvious game idea in a way. So what I have at this point in terms of ideas and formulas is this kind of idea formula glob. I'm thinking, this could be a little Sokoban game. And Dust Bunny is a funny name for a game like this. And, the idea and the formula are kind of jumbled up right now. That's both inevitable and fine. And but I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking I want to do something easy and not obvious. Let's do another Pico 8 tile map game. That's easy for me to do. And let's do something that I'm interested in, like cute bunnies. And maybe I'll start with something kind of a classic puzzle script mechanic of as you move around in this game, you kind of glom onto the tiles around you and you get bigger. But I'll do an easy but not obvious tweak here, which is I will ban all smart person game mechanics from this game. So there will be no tiles you step onto that allow you to scoot your blob around. There will be no tiles that modify, like there's no smart stuff, only levels, only picking up tiles. And I'll also start with this easy but not obvious win condition of just touch all the dirty tiles. That'll be a level. There's not going to be a get to the exit tile mechanic. It'll just be this other thing. And then, but to maybe have support like a level select replay system, I can just give the player like a score, like how efficiently can you move around this level, and fewest moves to kind of tidy up all the dirt or whatever. And it's easy for me at this point, without really having made anything yet, to imagine this is gonna be one way of engaging with this idea of the vacuum is stuck under the table. So first draft, I get this working pretty quickly, like an hour, something like that. That's promising. That's an indication that maybe I am doing something easy, which is great. And picking up tiles feels pretty good right away. The art kind of has a cute vibe and palette right away. It's really easy to set up that efficiency scoring mechanic, which also, it turns out, as a player is really obnoxious right away. It's like that's not a fun way to play these levels. It feels really bad. And now my plans for having a cool level select screen and a replay feature are completely invalidated and undermined. So that's going away. But the first few levels that I made are pretty fun. It's fun to find fun angles. I'm noticing at this point that maybe like some levels look easy but are hard. And vice versa. So I'm kind of responding to that, leaning into that. Can I do more levels that feel like that? That's kind of cool. But also I'm running out of level ideas like really fast. Like this base set of mechanics, partly because we started out with this easy but not obvious thing of ban all smart puzzle game mechanics. There's not a lot of levels to make. And yes, we're in CorgiSpace. We want our games to have short legs, but these legs are like pretty short. So we're back here. We're in our scenario with this, right? We've got this kind of like, I've got this idea that I like, vacuum kind of stuck under the tables that feels like a puzzle game. And I have a game that's not even a Sokoban really, and has no replay value and has almost no levels in it. And so then I'm at the inflection point. Do I bail on this thing, or do I try to figure out a better way to formulate this idea? And I think at this point, you do want to trust. Like, I sat down and made a prototype. That means something about the vacuum getting stuck under the tables is good, and I should pursue it. And it's absurd to pretend that this very first formulation, this first formula, this first draft of that idea is somehow going to be perfect. But there's this big question of like, how do we change that formula to make a good game? So, slight tangent, but when I'm saying formula, right, I want to like elaborate on this just real quick. Formulas are sort of like, in this sense, like a vehicle for delivering an idea, or something that an idea has imprinted on, so that when someone else sees it, they can sort of maybe see some of the things that your idea was inspiring or whatever. But formulas are plagued by so many things: anxiety, dogma about certain ways of working, bugs and glitches and unexpected obstacles. I think they tend to be kind of slippery and unpredictable, frog-like, I would say, in general. Formulas are kind of constantly in danger of becoming too slow and or too expensive. This can be really bad because you will get skittish about modifying that formula in the ways it needs to be modified because you've invested so much in it. And they're just kind of not trustworthy. Like, formulas are easily confused for ideas, and formulas are always infecting your ideas, which it turns out you need, but you still need to be aware of. And in a lot of ways, I think your formula is, these formulas, a series of formulas, are like your co-designer. They're another source of input on what you're doing with your design. And ultimately, the formula is also the final product. You don't get to ship an idea. You only get to ship a formula. Ideas are harder to pin down, but I think there are patterns. Ideas you start work on are like 1,000 times as important as ones you don't. It doesn't matter how big your notepad, how big your gameideas.txt file is. The ones you actually start are more important, period. It's a measure of the energy that they have or what they do to your brain, I think. I think ideas tend to be relatively simple. Ideas in this context tend to be simple. They've got maybe one or two basic parts. I think they tend to arrive with some kind of like barnacles or fog or clutter that need to be stripped away. So essentially like formula baggage that we want to work on kind of breaking off of there so the idea can make our formulas better. Ideas tend to be things that you notice more than things that you invent. And I think they tend to be more in the realm of play and playfulness ultimately, where formulas are more in the realm of games. And my most spurious subjective claim is that ideas have heart feel and formulas have brain feel. And I won't be defining that any further. Right. So Vampire Survivors meets Balatro is more of a formula than an idea in this model. RTS with crafting and persistent blah, blah, something or other, also a formula, right? And honestly, almost everything you start with is going to be kind of a formula. But I think if you actually start that project, that means there's an idea in there somewhere. Heart feel is the thing that makes you open a new project tab. So if you have started working on Vampire Survivors meets Balatro, the hottest new game of 2026, let's say, you're starting with some kind of formula idea glob thing that almost definitely has an idea in it, but the idea isn't the formula of Vampire Survivors meets Balatro. It's something else. So like, what do you notice about your plan your formula for this Vampire Survivors meets Balatro game. Like things that I would notice, Vampire Survivors and Balatro both have this aesthetic of game breaking in their design and their mechanics. They're kind of not what they seem at first in different ways. And the great thing, though, is that that's probably not what you noticed. You probably noticed something else because we are not the same person. And I think that is super important. So your job here is you are trying to kind of like dig up this beating heart thing in the middle of this glob, find that idea in there, because that thing needs love and protection and nurturing. And that's the thing that will show you how to get the formulas right. And the way that you extract that is by formulating. Like this series of formulas is an active process. This is like a verb. Okay, back to Dust Bunny. The idea of Dust Bunny, I think, is vacuum is stuck under the tables. To me, that has good heart feel. I'm drawn to that thing, and I think the formula actually has good brain feel too. The levels that I have are good. I don't have enough stuff to make enough of it, and here the temptation is resort to something that is hard to do and relatively obvious to do. So again, go back to some kind of smart person game mechanics or something like that. But I want to do something easy and not obvious. And this is where the third grain comes in. We're not limited to just our dev tools and our own brain. Your game has a grain too. Your game already has default behaviors. It already has things that are easier to do in it. And working with the grain of the game means doing what comes natural to this game as this thing that's its own entity now already. And this is not always what the formula says is correct or good to do. Formulas can be very misleading about the grain of your game. So what do you notice about this game? What does the game seem to notice about itself that you could use to kind of elevate that formula or find the next interesting formula thing to try? So for Dust Bunny, this was relatively straightforward. What Dust Bunny needed was more dust and more bunnies. So instead of just collecting white orbs that clean up dust, you can collect pink orbs that leave trails of dust. You can also pick up little orbs that are partly pink, which will, if any dust touches them, they will turn into pink orbs. And ultimately made a pink bunny that leaves dust trails behind itself. And this ended up working really well. They tripled the number of puzzles that were in the game very quickly and easily, and ended up with this funny kind of like narrative where you start with, narrative is maybe a heavy term for this, but you start with this very clean, tidy bunny, and by the end of the game, it's this kind of like messy pink bunny. And we get to do a joke about that with the game over screen, right? The thing I wanted to call out before I move on to next things, though, is there may be a temptation to simply skip to this step. Just come up with the right game in the first place. The programming equivalent of, you simply don't write bugs in the first place or whatever. But you can't consult the game grain if there's no game. Games emerge from previous formulas and the way those formulas refined your ideas and from the way you noticed things in them, and the real easy, not obvious things to do here that guide you toward a very cool formula depend on the grain of the game. So you have to make something first in order to be able to do this thing this way. But it's not just Dust Bunny. I made 15 games in the last year, and I've made a few other games before that. So, Cannonball started with this idea of formula glob that was based on Super Mario Brothers speedruns, which are basically a one-button runner. And you're always holding run and right, and you just tap jump at the right time. And that felt like that could be a whole arcade game almost. The first formula was not very good. It had kind of a charge jump, and I didn't like how the endless design was playing out. The game was ending itself, and it had a, what do you call it, an asymptote that was a problem. And so I worked on refining, what's really important about this idea formula. What's the real thing? And the real thing is, like, I want to be running so fast that I'm almost falling over, like you do in a dream sometimes. That would be cool to capture in a dinky little pixel art arcade game somehow. And so started leaning into things that accentuated that were really easy to set up. So the game doesn't have an ending still, because that's hard work, but it has a way to slow yourself down without getting game over. And it has windows that kind of are small targets to hit, but emphasize that kind of like feeling of velocity and being barely in control. One of the games from the last year that I think turned out really good is this game Dust Settlers. And it started out with just really wanting to riff on this old indie arcade game called Block Sum. The first formula was not just not fun to play, it was actually mathematically impossible. The code had to just be ejected and restarted. But that helped me figure out that actually the thing that I thought was the main thing going on was not as important. The thing that I really liked about Block Sum is this way that combos stave off the end of the world in a way. There's this kind of like almost there last few seconds time dilation feeling that's really, really cool. And I really just wanted to make an arcade game that had that thing going on. And that made it really easy to know that it was okay to simplify other aspects of the design, notice other things that were happening, and lean into that feeling more specifically. Another one of the games, Mole Mole, I think turned out good. All I had was this, I had this thought that what if you made a Sokoban game where you also had bombs? That's fun because you get to cheat at Sokoban now, but also if the bomb makes a diamond shape, maybe it could carve out new Sokoban blocks at the margins. That could be kind of cool. But first formula, very similar to Dust Bunny, is just like, this isn't enough. This isn't really a whole game in the way that I wanted it to be, or at the scale that I can make it. The thing that I started to notice while I was playing that first formula, though, is this game felt more like bomb diffusing than bomb blowing up. It felt like bombs were tricky to use. You had to use them really carefully. That kind of led naturally to finding the right obstacles for finishing this game up, which are dirt and water, it turns out. And so background to Dust Bunny, just to recap, we started out with glomming stuff to clean dust and score by moves, but we didn't have enough levels, the scoring was not fun, and we were able to refine that idea to be to acknowledge the like good heart feel of the vacuum stuck onto the table, and we were able to look at the grain of that game and realize what we really need here is dust blobs, partly dust blobs, the Dusty Bunny, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say you need to separate your ideas from your formulas, it's not exactly, again, that we are just labeling things to be a certain thing. It's we're using this as almost like a diagnostic framework. We want to acknowledge that by necessity, formulas and ideas are kind of intertwined, but that the formula might need to be discarded entirely in order to keep pushing that idea forward. But the idea probably doesn't need to be discarded. So we're going to be brushing off that idea. We're going to be clarifying it. We're trying to make it simple. We're trying to make it powerful. And an idea that's so good that you actually start making something, that I think deserves trust and love from you. But you will have to kind of go find the idea inside that glob. And the way you do that is this active process of formulating, of creating a series of formulas so that those are participating in how you do this design. Usual disclaimers, reminders, formula is a minefield of temptations with no power steering or GPS. That's a mixed metaphor, but we'll go with it. The slow, expensive formula is an existential threat, and you have to recognize that. And if you spot a formula kind of masquerading as an idea, you have to call that bluff. You're going to be looking for these opportunities to kind of like guide and improve these formulas by doing the easy, not obvious things those in turn are going to be strengthening your idea. This is the way in which we make the idea simple and powerful, is by noticing the great things that are emerging from those formulas and then building off of those things as we go. I've been saying notice a lot throughout this talk, and that's not a coincidence. It's something I think is super important, and it is the thing that I have been centering in the middle of this semi-neurotic design process. And I think noticing for me starts with a reveal. And I love a good reveal. I think a good twist has nothing on a good reveal. Like, the moment in a book where you realize a little thing. It can be really small. It can be you didn't realize whose point of view the first two paragraphs were from, or something like that, until the third paragraph, let's say. That's a classic John Gardner trick, right? When you go through a door in a Doom level or in a Dark Souls catacomb, you just pass through the door and it kind of like goes over you and reveals the room to you, right? Or little things like the feeling of like, oh, it was right in front of me the whole time. Why didn't I see that? Classic movie making stuff of like, why is the director, the cinematographer showing me this character this way I don't understand yet? And now I'm starting to get that sensibility or that sense. And, this is a thing that is in the reveal is in puzzle games and action games and story games, and it's in food, it's in everything that I like and enjoy, and I think it's really important and kind of beautiful. So, for a while there, it was kind of like, oh, so as a game designer, this is what I do. Maybe I'm a revealatician now, or like I'm a revealologist. But that ultimately kind of got me thinking about like, maybe the reveal isn't the bottom of this. I mean, there's like is there a layer under the reveal? Is a reveal really just one way of creating conditions under which noticing can happen? And what if noticing is the important thing about what's going on here? And that got me thinking about a bunch of other things. So, when the painter is painting, they're looking at their painting while they paint, and they're noticing what the paint does. And they're looking at their painting, partly because the audience will be looking at the painting and they'll be noticing, but also the painter is reacting to what they see and what they're noticing in the painting. And the musician is playing and listening, and they are noticing the sounds, and they're listening partly because the audience will be listening and they're reacting to what they notice in it. They're writing with the piece, and the author is writing and reading partly because the audience will be, but also they're reacting to what they notice in the words. They're writing with the piece. And I think when we're doing it right, I think the game designer is implementing and playing. And they're playing partly because the audience will be playing, but also they are reacting to what they notice in the playing, and they're designing with the game. And I don't think it's a coincidence that if you sat down and tried to make a list of the most beautiful games, almost none of them are made by game designers. Tetris, Dota, career game designers, professional trained game designers, right? Tetris, Dota, Counter-Strike, poker, soccer, Go, chess, Balatro, Katamari, Eco, if you want, Donkey Kong, like it can't be a coincidence, right? And I don't think ideas are things that you come up with. These idea formula globs that strike you, I think they tend to be things that you notice more than things you invent. And the easy and not obvious things that make those formulas so potent or interesting or fun or powerful to people, I think those tend to be things that you notice more than things that you invent or come up with too. So everybody say hi to Steggy. This is my corgi. But basically, what if game design is best understood in retrospect as something that happened? Maybe we can understand it as like an accumulation of noticings or a record of reactions to playing, where each choice you make is based on the last, and it's kind of like mutating and procedural, like a program. You assert something, your project refutes it or yes ands it, and you react, and then it reacts, and it's almost like it's like conversational or epistolary. There's a correspondence between you and a thing that didn't exist yet, but all the audience is going to find is that final formula, and it's in a bottle on a beach somewhere, and all that we're hoping is that they will pick it up and that they will be noticing stuff in it too. And I think I've run out of things a little earlier than I planned, but basically that's how I've been approaching my game making this year. It's been really fun, and I think it's pretty important to have fun when you're doing this. And I've got my favorite Patricia Highsmith quote up here again, otherwise, yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you for letting me up here to holler about this.
Thank you so much, Adam. That was wonderful. Fantastic talk. We got a whole bunch of questions, so it's all right that you finished a little bit earlier because we can go through these questions.
Thank you, question askers.
Oh, another one just came through as well, so make sure not to miss that. Okay. So Dom Camus asked a little bit earlier, the vacuum stuck under table idea is what I call a top-down idea. Does this CorgiSpace approach also work for bottom-up ideas, like mechanical first?
I would say yes, but I would say partly because ultimately, and I think one of the tricky things about the sequence in which I present the ideas is we obviously land in a space where we're kind of like designing from the middle out. I think they're the most common thing if you sit down and actually start making a game is that you have some top down and some bottom up that seem compatible. And it puts, and you have this weird, you have this mix, you have this little sandwich of things, and that's the thing that gets you started. You have enough bottom up to program something, and you have enough top down to feel excited about it. And then what we're doing throughout that process is those things are talking to each other. Maybe you don't even know what the top down is. You're starting from the bottom up. I promise there is a top down something in there if you've started. I 100% believe that, but do you know what that is yet? Do you have a really solid grasp of what that is yet? Who knows? And likewise, I think top down, you can be really, really excited, but your ability to press keys and start writing code and see what happens is going to depend, I think, disproportionately on having some sense of a bottom-up idea of how to evaluate that. So I think my worldview has ended up being that I don't really think there's such a thing as a true top-down only or bottom-up only approach. I think you might be a little more top heavy or leaning one way or the other or something, but I think both things are in play. And I think working in a way that, tries to acknowledge that or tries to look for those opportunities to take things that are cool about your bottom up feeling and let that influence or engage with your top down heart feel stuff. And then that top down heart feel getting clarified and being a stronger signal means you can modify the bottom up kind of game mechanics things to, embrace that or embellish that or take that even farther. Like that interplay between these two things is the thing that I love about this process and that I find really enjoyable about this process. I don't know. I think if someone came in with evidence that this was not true, and many people do pure top down or bottom up, I would relinquish my position immediately. But I think my predilection or my bias is that I think it's more likely that we're all going into the start of these projects with this strong mix of top and bottom down inspirations or ideas, and we're excited about the fact that they have a connection to begin with. But if we get, we might confuse the likely flaws with our first draft of our bottom-up mechanical plans for deep flaws in our top-down idea that got us really excited. And that's the thing that I want to keep an eye out for when I'm working, at least.
Great answer. Thank you. Very in-depth. I'm trying to keep an eye on all the questions that are coming through, and we'll go through in order, and we'll see how many we can get done before we get to 6 o'clock my time. And also apologies. There's a cat behind me getting hungry, and so if you can hear meowing, that's why. I'll mute myself when you're answering the questions. Okay. So next question. Was from so there are a couple of questions related to just trying to understand. There's a lot of discussion in the chat about your ideas formula model for thinking about things, and so this wasn't phrased as a question exactly, but from Gawain in the chat, they said, it seems to me that the idea is the core theme / crucial mechanic that defines the game. The formula is how that idea is conveyed to the player. And then another comment from Dan, comparison to jokes. Idea is the premise of a joke while the formula is the setup and delivery. Do those kinds of ways of thinking of it match with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think those are both pretty reasonable assessments or summaries. Like, for example, I heard, I was listening to an interview with the American comedian Nate Bargatze recently, and he was talking about something really a lot like this. He was talking about having, he knew he wanted to do a joke about never buying milk unless he was in a relationship with someone. But he knew that and he had that little kernel of thing. That thing had good heart feel, but the brain feel was just essentially, he wasn't using those words, but in my terminology, the brain feel was wrong every time he tried it. And he eventually found a place inside of another joke structure where that was appropriate and worked or whatever. And it was very much like a thing of trying to figure out, how does this core idea make it out to the world? But in a way, and the wrinkles that I want to add, or the things that I think are interesting to think about, are the first draft of this talk specifically talked about a formula as a vehicle for an idea, but I don't think I really believe that. I do think it's more like an imprint. The formula can't carry the idea. The formula is just itself. It can only carry itself. That's where you get Duchamp's transference and stuff, right? A formula is an artifact that goes out, and it's its own thing. It simply can't have your idea in it. But your idea can shape it. So I think it's a funny back and it's the back and forth is the thing that I keep wanting to stress the more I think about this and the more I talk about this, because I think one of the reasons that I've been able to finish so many of these games and be so happy with the designs is I'm not being sort of prudish about the inviolability of the idea. There's something in the idea that has me excited, will it end up being the thing that's the most important in this game? Maybe not. The game that I released last week started with an idea about hourglasses that would decay your inventory, and it ended up being about a little guy making stew, right? And I immediately started a new prototype about hourglasses decaying your inventory. So there's an attentiveness and an alertness and this kind of like designing with your game as it emerges, and not feeling bad about if the game that's emerging doesn't work with that idea anymore. Okay, the idea gets set aside. It needs a different formula. But if this formula is turning out cool, what's the idea in there? The back and forth, the process of it is the thing that I'm most invested in. So I think it's helpful to be able to, again, like diagnostically separate ideas from formulas. I would just be hesitant about sort of like getting too binary or too discriminatory, or trying to arrange them in a hierarchy, because I think they're both so important and they inform each other, and the idea means so much to you, but the formula is the only thing that goes out the door. So it's thinking about those things, looking for what that is in your work. That would be the thing that I would emphasize, I think.
Great, thank you so much. So I hope you're okay with a bunch more questions. Is that all right with you? They keep coming in.
Yeah,
we probably won't be able to get through all of them. But then we'll take them to Discord afterwards or something. So the next question was from Plush Lola, and I think a few people were wondering this. You referred to like smart person game mechanics or smart game mechanics a few times. They were hoping for some elaboration on that. And they also asked specifically what makes the pink stuff in Dust Bunnies not a smart person mechanic to you.
That is fair. And I don't know that I'm going to have a super good answer for this, but I think I'm associating smart person mechanics with like some of my all-time favorite games. I'm playing Spooky Express by Alan Hazelden and crew right now, and Zachtronics games are, I think, a good example of what I would say are smart person mechanics. They're my all-time actual favorite games to sit and play. But they definitely require a certain amount of like alertness, or like I don't know, like a commitment to a certain level of cognitive something.
Thinkiness?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Like they're really like quite thinky.
Yeah.
And I think I know that for me as a designer, I don't have as much to bring to the table for that kind of play. But one of the reasons that I love them and play them so much is I feel like those games function so much in the realm of noticing. They're just doing it in a way that's kind of out of my reach. Love to play them, know that I will struggle to do that. But because I love to play them, I do feel this temptation to start working that into my designs, even though I know that it will be a struggle for me to take that to a level where it stands up with those games, or where it feels like those games. So I mostly call it out in this talk because it's been a thing that's helped me kind of like stay on track, even though I think some of the games that I've been making do have a lot of emergent complexity. There's one game where I thought the top scores were going to be around 450, but people have figured out these demonic workaround systems to get scores up in the 800s. So like I adore systems that have that kind of complexity. I personally struggle to work in that space often, and I am trying to focus on, being in a space where not just my taste, but the things that I have a natural affinity for are centered as well, I guess.
This probably goes against the part of the premise of the talk, but I would love to see what happens when you make a game and you just go full smart person mechanics and see what happens. So if you want to do it as a one-off, go for it.
There's a really extreme risk that I simply will not finish it because I will confuse myself so much.
I mean, I guess that's what you were saying. That would be like going against the grain, basically, and it would be harder to finish.
It does, yeah. It goes against my grain, even though it is so complementary to my taste, and that's a thing that has been helpful to me to acknowledge in my work. Certainly,
right. That makes sense. That's great. So next question, we'll do a couple more, maybe. Sorry, folks, we won't get to all of them. There have been a lot. So from Vida, there's a question: do ideas always have a feeling/vibe you want players to experience? Is it helpful to add detail to the idea, or is it more helpful to rework the formula?
So to the second part, the short answer is both. I think you're constantly in a process of refining the idea and refining the formula. And the big thing that's helpful to me is to just know or remember or care that the idea is real and does exist and probably shouldn't be entirely discarded, whereas the formulas, I think, are more likely to need to be discarded or to be super misleading or something like that. But in terms of, it's an interesting question, I think, to decide whether or not the idea is a thing that I want a player to experience or not. And my inclination is maybe counterintuitively to say that that's not actually what I want the player to experience exactly, but I really, really like the idea that the player is noticing the same kinds of things that I'm noticing. And I'm usually, when I'm doing like level design, for example, I am trying to create scenarios where they see the same things. So, for example, I don't actually hope that when people play Dust Bunny, they go, this is just like vacuuming the house. I love this. Like, that's not what I'm going for. But what I do hope they're going for is that they get to go on this little noticing journey that's similar to the one I went on when I was kind of like following the inspiration of vacuuming, which is, look at this funny implication for level design. Look at this funny implication for level design. What if you switch these things around? Why is it harder to see that this could fit through here instead of this fitting through there? Like, why are we like this? I do want the player to catch as much of that as possible, but that feels a little more second order or consequential to me. Like, I don't need them to go, vacuuming, this is so pure. But I do want them to go like, wow, it looks like it should be able to fit, but it doesn't. Why is it doing that? I do want the player to catch those. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where my head is at for sure.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you. So I think we'll take one last question, and just to mix it up, I'll pick somebody we haven't had a question from so far. So Feverish asked, how do you know if a game has too much heart feel versus too much brain feel? Is it some sort of balance? What ratio would you give it? Do you think about that?
I don't think that's ever crossed my mind before. I think interesting. I don't think I experience it that way, but I think partly for all the reasons I've been discussing, and but partly like again, like I think it's similar to the last question in a lot of ways. Like, I think the heart feel versus the brain feel are, for me, are a developer designer facing distinction, because the player, again, my worldview is the player does not get to have the idea. That simply doesn't go to them. It's not how this works. The formula goes to them. The only thing they get is the thing that for you was on the brain feel side of things, and your heart feel is guiding what you do with that. And at that point, that goes to a complete stranger. And again, like for me, I hope that they are noticing the things that I noticed or feeling the things that I was feeling when I was navigating that formula, when I was navigating the creation of that artifact that is being, transferred to, again, a complete stranger. But I don't get to send them the idea. So I don't know if they get to have any sense of heart feel or brain feel as a player. As a designer, I think I definitely find myself in places where I have a prototype that has quite a bit of brain feel but no heart feel. And in that situation, I end up dropping it generally. That's the pattern for me. I was working on a game where you have to navigate these labyrinths using chess pieces. And as you capture chess pieces, that gives you your next chess piece move, which had like really good brain feel and absolutely no heart feel. And that is sitting on my laptop completely undeveloped at the moment. There's just no energy behind it. But when there's too much heart feel in a game, which is a lot of the examples that I use in the talk, it usually just means that I'm in the middle of this process and I need more formula there. I need a little more brain feel to kind of like hold all that stuff from the heart feel or make this string of noticings that I think somebody else would also get a kick out of or whatever.
Fantastic, thank you. I think we will wrap it up there. These cats are now getting so hungry they're climbing on top of me. So I should go sort that out. Thank you, Adam, so much for that presentation and for answering all those questions. There are a bunch more. If folks want to ask those questions, please go to the Discord. Just a reminder, thinkygames.com/Discord is how you can get there, and there are threads per talk. You should be able to find it, and I'm sure Adam will be around to answer any more questions. Yeah. Great. So thank you, Adam. If you want to drop out now, that's great. And I'll just wrap up and head into the break with everybody. So yeah, thank you again, Adam.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.